Here's a book you ought to read. Madalyn Murray O'Hair's Freedom Under Siege. Basically, it says that organized religion is working to destroy your freedoms. It strives to influence your representatives, elected representatives, and to write the laws under which you live, to regulate your children's schools, and dictate what is taught there, to censor your entertainment, choose what you and your neighbors will be able to see and read, to determine for all women the right to control their lives and their bodies. And it's your money that makes this possible, this tyranny. The churches have their billions invested in profit-making enterprises, and their wealth grows daily from gifts, grants, government largesse, rents, interest, capital gains, and they're now financial giants. This is shocking, but we'll spend the rest of the hour talking about it with Dr. O'Hair and her son Garth tonight on Alternative Views News Magazine. Get out of the logo take it there. I'll come back to this. Yeah. Call it something different than we got. Madalyn Murray O'Hair is one of the most courageous fighters for civil rights and sanity in the United States. And we're very lucky to have her with us tonight, along with her son Garth, and of course, our old friend over there, Doug Kellner. Now, we are going to do two programs. The first one, of course, you'll be seeing now. We'll be talking mainly about church-state relationships, civil rights, and the mass media, and also the struggles of Dr. O'Hair over the years. And then on the next program, we'll be talking more freely about religion, its place in society, why people are religious, and looking very closely, critically, at religion, particularly the Christian religion. But let's talk about civil rights and church-state relationships. Your book, Freedom Under Siege, is really a dynamic thing. I really enjoyed it. Of course, it's scary, as a lot of things are scary about living today. But we have a lot of myths about the Founding Fathers being so profoundly religious and all. Is this really true?
This is the thing that particularly annoys me, because no matter where we go, we find the ministry invoking the name of God in respect to the Founding Fathers. And they neglect to point out that the God which the people know and whom those ministers represent is not the same, quote, God, end quote, as those Founding Fathers were talking about. The Founding Fathers deliberately eschewed Christianity. They attacked it vigorously whenever and wherever they could. The very first book ever written in the United States, which attacked Christianity itself, was written by Colonel Ethan Allen. They would close up their stores if they knew that, wouldn't they? With the American Heritage furniture in therein. But it was, and this was a very, very specific assault against the Christian faith. And it was followed by Tom Paine's assault against it, and George Washington, Adams, Madison, Jefferson, all of them. Franklin particularly. They were all deists. And I think that it is deliberately a deceit of the current ministers to try to convince people that Christianity is the same as deism.
What is the difference? What is a deist as opposed to an Orthodox Christian?
Well, I think since you're on the program and you are a philosopher, we might immediately have a difference of opinion, because what I constantly do is not go to the philosophers, but rather what I do is go to what the common people felt at any given period, and how that was reflected, say, in the newspapers rather than in the books on philosophy. And of course, what was reflected in our Declaration of Independence. And the Founding Fathers put it there. They put in that by deism they meant nature and nature's God. and they thought that there was some sort of creative force that had put the world, set the world into motion, or set nature into motion, and then stepped back, and that was it. It never again interfered into the affairs of mankind. And as a matter of fact, the Declaration of Independence spoke to this, nature and nature's God, or the great God of the universe. And then, of course, later on, when they started the Constitution, they didn't say, in the opinion of God or with the help of Jesus Christ. Instead, they said, we the people. And in the Declaration of Independence, they said because of the need to reach out to the public opinion of all mankind. This is what they were appealing to, all mankind's opinion, not God's opinion. They more or less were kissing him off and just forgetting that there was either Jesus Christ or Yahweh or Jehovah or Elohim or the I am that I am, and saying, well, there was something. George Washington, absolutely refused to go to church. When he got to church, because he was a politician and he had to go, he refused to say prayers. He refused to say communion. They just had a hell of a time with old George.
What?
Just over and over and over again. And one of the things, of course, that they have done is to fake George Washington kneeling at Valley Forge praying to the Christian God. He never prayed to the Christian God. They wouldn't mention the name Jesus Christ if they could avoid it. Abraham Lincoln is the single president of the United States who never uttered the phrase Jesus Christ. So they try to put the words Jesus Christ in his mouth in all of his official writings, and they can't do it.
They also put presidents' heads on piece of paper with "In God We Trust"
Yes,
over
they
them.
do.
That's a clever propaganda.
It is
Why
very.
were these early fathers of the country, I hate to use that term, but why were they so strongly against church interfering in state relationships?
Well, I think for the reason for that, you have to go back and look at the period of time in our nation's history prior to our forming of our unique governmental system, and it was a unique governmental system at that time, which is that you had a number of colonial groups coming from England and other colonies, all under the auspices of freedom of worship, of not being able to attend their particular church, etc., in the country that they were in. But the whole thing that I think that a lot of people fail to understand in the general public is that these persons came to the United States and reestablished the very same tyranny from which they fled in their own individual colonies. The Protestants came into Massachusetts, fortified it as a Protestant colony, and the Roman Catholics therein were driven out, and they had to seek refuge in Maryland, for example, which was the Roman Catholic colony. So what in fact we had was a situation of having 13 individualized theocracies, little warring theocracies warring across the border between one another. And our founding fathers knew that we couldn't unite to the extent that we had to unite to defeat the greatest military and naval power in the world at that time, which was England, the greatest economic power at that time, in order to form a new nation with those differences in theology tearing us apart internally, and that we had to therefore found a government, part of which was separation of state and church, to separate the church away so that we could band together politically in order to gain our independence from England, which was our objective at that time.
Dr. O'Hare.
Let me interject something there before you go to the next question, because it's important. We constantly stumble upon some research when we're looking for something else. I know that recently I was trying to find the genealogical lines of Frances Wright, who was a great female atheist. And while I was doing this, I stumbled on to some information about the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the Plymouth Bay Colony and the corporations which were assembled to bring people to America. And I found out that one of the basic premises behind that was that English businessmen were infuriated that the Spaniards were colonizing in South America, that they were colonizing in the Gulf of Mexico area, that they had been very successful in colonizing Africa. So they decided to experiment with what they called the Protestant experiment. I looked at that and my teeth fell out. Can you imagine that our country was deliberately started with Protestants because some businessmen were furious about the Roman Catholic Church, and in reprisal they were going to actually plant colonies that were Protestant in America. Okay, then I tried to find more about this in America. The trail stops dead. So I've gone to my English compatriots and said, hey, we have to find out about this. And they are coming back to me full of whiffs of it and saying, my God, it's true. It was a Protestant experiment, a deliberate Protestant experiment. So I have to go to England now to try to see if I can't uncover this. But who would know that unless they accidentally happened upon it? So seriously is our history depleted with the information we need when it comes to religion.
Let me ask you this. In your book, you indicate that the government, particularly the Congress, for many years after the Constitution was signed, were very solicitous to make sure that there was this separation of church and state. But after a period of time, this broke down, and we have the situation in which we have now. What caused this, and where are we today in this relationship?
There have been a number of causes, I think, at a number of levels of time in the United States, but I think the situation in which we are now, which was most compelling, is that immediately following the Second World War, the United States made a political decision, what we call theopolitical decision, to this effect. They saw that after the First World War, Russia had gone communist. After the Second World War, it appeared that China would go communist. Hell, that's 2/3 of the world. That's 2/3 of the world lost right there. And the American government became panic-stricken. They had become panic-stricken first in 1906 when they moved in order to support Christianity at the time of the Russian Revolution. But by 1946, after the First World War and then after the Second World War, there were a number of laws deliberately passed. There was a concept elaborated that we must be the good guys in the white hats, the Christian the Christian capitalists, and we must be fighting the bad guys in the black hats, the atheistic communists, so that instead of meeting the communistic economic social system head on and trying to compete with it in the intellectual marketplace on its own level, we didn't. As a nation, we decided to fight communism with God. And this is so idiotic, but if you go back and you read Allen Dulles and you read the policymakers of that era, it comes out loud and clear that we were going to premise our foreign affairs and all of our foreign activities, including our communications and our treaties with the European countries, we were going to foster Christianity. Now we find out that this was very, very seriously felt, because we find out now that the CIA moved in and erected in every country in the world a Christian Democratic Party, that the leaders were picked by our country, the money was sent in by our country, the politics were dictated by our country as a Christian-based fight, emotional fight against communism. So what happens? The communists are winning on the economic and the socio-economic ideas, and all of Europe, all of Africa, all of Asia is turning to communism, while we are still trying to push God in order to fight them. And we emphasize over and over. Now then, if we're going to use Christianity as a foreign affairs weapon, the nation has to be Christian. That's all there is to it. So in 1940, probably 1942, 43, the government decided that everybody was going to be Christian in the United States. You didn't have a chance. You didn't have a chance. You're young enough. You didn't have a chance. The government of the United States decided that you would be Christian and you would never have an opportunity to choose for anything else. So Christianity was made a fabric of our politics. You weren't there when Eisenhower was president. You should get down on your knees and thank God. Because Eisenhower had so thoroughly commingled the idea of capitalism and communism that nobody could get out of this. Capitalism, the Christian
And Christianity,
capitalism.
right.
Yes, against communism.
Did this equation of communism with atheism sort of fuel the Cold War hatred of communism and actually demonize communists into absolute evil, the enemy? This is sort of a religious sort of view.
Not sort of, it
It
was.
is, right.
Godless
religious view.
communism. that's
All
the
that
big
you have
problem.
to do is go back and read that whole McCarthy thing, and all you have to do is go back and read the preeminence of the Roman Catholic Church in the politics of that time, and what Cardinal Spellman did and what Cardinal McIntyre did, and you will be horrified. Cardinal Spellman would go to the White House and dictate policies, and that policy would be accepted because this was Cardinal Spellman. Remember, he was probably one of the most powerful persons in the world, and that the papacy said over and over and over again that Cardinal Spellman could bring any more money into the Roman Catholic Church from the United States in any year than all of Europe could bring into the papacy. And when Spellman went to Rome, he was listened to. And when Spellman went to Washington, he was listened to. As a matter of fact, the early part of the Vietnamese War was known throughout the East Coast as Spellman's War.
Right, he promoted it actively. I was in New York at the time when he would speak for the war and against communism. This Bishop Fulton Sheen in the 1950s
he was
had a
terrible.
program that I remember watching when I was a
Yeah.
kid, where he would draw on the blackboard equations between communists, atheists, evil, and then on the other side there was God, Christians, and capitalism, and he would rant and rave about the demon.
Well, you get the three CCs, an intertwined three CCs, you know. The other thing that worried me is, of course, we had Father McLaughlin, who laid the network for that out in the Middle West. And then from there, we moved into McCarthy. And McCarthy, I'm sorry, he was Roman Catholic, and he was being backed by his church. And they tore the fabric of the nation apart over this whole idea of Christianity. You cannot fight a socio-political idea with a religious idea. And our government is now finding that out. In a sense, it's finding it out. But now you have a throwback to that period with Reagan and his crowd getting in, and they're going to try it again.
Yes, Reagan was telling the Morrow majority group up in Dallas that the answer to every problem of statecraft in the United States can be found in the Bible. You remember that?
Well, I think that's because, too, that Reagan finds himself in the following position. He's been elected essentially on economic issues. Now, true, religion has played some points back and forth, but essentially, I think what we were looking at was an anti-Carter vote on economic policy that put Reagan in the White House. And when you look at that, you say, all right, well, then Reagan is put into the point where he has to deliver economically, but he can't. The office of the presidency as such is not capable of solving our current economic situation because of the multiplicity of factors that go into making it up. The president's office can't do it alone. So what can Reagan do then? He can then deliver on the emotional issues divorced from the political system of prayer in the public school or busing or getting the nice little white Christian kids away from the Negroes or whatever. He can deliver on those things. And I think that the Eisenhower administration, the Nixon administration, some of them were playing that same kind of bandwagon of delivering on the emotional issue of we're going to protect you against the dirty atheist peril, and that religion can be used against them, and playing an emotional bandwagon when they really couldn't deliver politically, or they weren't really through the political process able to strike any real balance of power with them.
It was during that era that I came upon the idea in my head that philosophers should be lined up and shot. Because we had a professor of philosophy at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, and his name was Malcolm Moos, M-O-O-S. And his entire job after Eisenhower got into office was speech writing for Eisenhower. He never wrote a speech for Eisenhower that he didn't say communistic atheism or atheistic communism. And following that, of course, he won by his adroit manipulation of religion and socioeconomic factors into the people's mind in one big lump of devil versus Christian, that he was given the presidency of the University of Minnesota for that noble deed. And I was so distressed about that because as an atheist, but as an American and as a citizen who really appreciated what small little bits of democratic procedures we do have in the United States and the potential that we have in our Constitution, it horrified me constantly to have myself identified with communism, about which I knew nothing at that particular time. Later on, of course, I made a complete and thorough study, as much as I could, of the Marxian ideas. But this was an untoward and disgusting thing for a professor of philosophy to do, or for the President of the United States to stoop so low as to take those kind of emotional issues in order to defeat what they felt was the socioeconomic thrusts of the USSR.
And also to promote the interests of religion and the church by associating its opposition with atheism. So it cuts both ways.
Well,
They
that's
use the
the thing.
anti-communism to defame the atheists and keep them in their place.
That's the thing. You see, for a long time, the dog of government was wagging the tail of religion. And now the moral majority thinks it's the dog and the government is the tail. And the moral majority is about to see if they can't wag the dog.
Can you comment on this? Some people claim that the role of the moral majority and these other Christian right-wing political groups indicate a increased and aggressive role of the church and religion in politics. Is this true, or has this been going on more covertly in the last decades of American political
It has
life?
always been going on covertly, and I think that what we're seeing now is simply the response to their ability to gather a tremendous amount of money and to use that money in order to effectuate their purposes so that they can yell louder. But the message that they have is just exactly the same as the rest. The one thing I am distressed about more than anything else is that I have seen the Roman Catholic Church, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Jews, come out and officially chastise the moral majority when the moral majority is only doing overtly what they are doing covertly. But if they come out and say, look at that dirty nasty over there, then nobody will see them sitting over here being dirty nasty undercover. And it's this is, again, is another trick. But all that this is it isn't a groundswell. It's an evidence of more money. Which cigarette has the most money to advertise?
And media visibility.
That's right.
And using the most advanced techniques of advertising in the media to promote these ideas.
And to focus this at the right place at the right time so that they can effectuate what they want.
But you know, one of the things that I don't understand is that we see on, and I really don't understand this, and maybe you have an answer, and I'll ask you the question here. On ABC, NBC, CBS, every place, you will have a show that has a run, and it'll last 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, and then it's kaput. But these people get on, and they are extremely dull, and their run doesn't stop. They just keep on going, and they keep on piling up more and more money for mediocrity. Now, I had an occasion to talk, incidentally, about why we elected Nixon with one of my friends in England, Baron Avro Manhattan. He's a theopolitician. And he said, oh, I know why the people elected Nixon, which may be the reason that they watch this kind of television. He said, because your people are mediocre. They identify with mediocrity, and that's what they want. And I would hope that this isn't true in America, that the American people are not identifying with the mediocrity that comes on that tube.
I think that these, particularly the Christian Broadcasting Network and the so-called PTL Club and these sort of Christian programs that are, year after year on, are playing on people's real needs and their real fears. People are afraid of unemployment, of an increasingly insecure world. They're suffering all sorts of frustrations, and they want some sort of security, consolation, etc. And these religious broadcasting corporations are very skilled at manipulating people and to getting them to cough up money to solve their anxieties and fears. That is, they offer these solutions that, well, if you want to be saved, if you want to make it through the tough times ahead, you pray and we'll pray for you. You send $15 and your problems will be solved.
Well, that's true. They talk about it, you hear a lot of times, if you want a job, just pray and Jesus will find you a job.
And
Jesus
send us
will find you a
$15
wife.
and we'll pray for you, which is really preying on the needs and the fears of the people that are a disadvantaged lot in American society, that haven't had the education and the leisure and wealth to educate themselves.
Well, yes, I think that's true, but I think that probably it is much more, what they do is much more pernicious, because in their doing this and appealing to those individual components of our population, they also are undermining basic principles upon which the nation is predicated. And once those basic principles are lost through the great press of the populace pressing for them, they are down the drain, and that's it. And I'm talking about the very basic rights which were put beyond constitutions or laws or anything else. The first 10 amendments to the Constitution, for instance. I was just reading the history of those yesterday, and it says this is something which can never be changed. It is taken out of the power of government to change it. It was adopted at the time of the Constitution, and its Bill of Rights is just a listing of those inalienable rights of man, and that no government can do it, so that this is not a part of the contractual part of the Constitution. They would do away with this. They would shut people up because, oh, you're talking about pornography. You cannot speak. Oh, you're printing pornography. You cannot do it. And yet I sat there and listened to a daughter of one of the most prominent men talking at great length of how far she would go with petting with her husband-to-be, but he could not insert the penis, etc. I sat there fascinated because she thought she was being pure, and all she was doing was being a tease, and all she was doing was really causing extraordinary frustration for herself and the man involved, and came the time for the lights and the fireworks. It wasn't going to come, and I knew it, and she knew it, and everybody else knew it. And you thought, oh, this poor woman, she's going to be deranged in another year.
Well,
Can we get back to some history? I really want to talk with you about the famous Murray case back in 1963, which you attempted to kind of restore the balance in some small way, at least, in church-state relationships and getting prayer and religion out of the public schools. Can you give us the background on that and what the results were, not only legally then, but also what happened to you, how you were treated by people in the courts and the government?
We have to laugh because that's such a long story. I think probably the most compelling thing that people who watch this program need to know is that we went to the public schools and said we were not interested in having the King James Version of the Bible read in the public schools or a recitation of the prayer to Jesus Christ. There was at that time a great deal of controversy in Baltimore, Maryland, because the evangelicals who believed that Jesus Christ said to pray in private didn't want prayers in schools. The Jews didn't want a prayer to Jesus Christ. The Roman Catholics wanted the Douay version, and the atheists went in and said, why bother with any of it? So when we went in and asked for this, we spent a little over 8 months arguing with the school board, and finally the official school board requirement, which came down to be laid upon my son, was as follows. In order not to offend his Christian cohorts in the classroom, he must stand and assume an attitude of reverence while the Bible was read. I've never been able to figure out what an attitude of reverence is. Second, when the prayer was said, he must move his lips as if he were saying the prayer, because otherwise it would be offensive to the Christians if he didn't, because then they would see that he was not participating in this thing that they held so dear.
And likewise, Jews or Hindus or people of other religions had to do similar?
Yes. Well, if he didn't do this, fine. We fought. The only thing that we wanted, the only thing we asked for was we want to get out of the classroom, then let him be excused. And they said, well, if he is excused from the classroom, he must stand outside the door in the hall, which is the place for punishment. So that everybody will know that this is a place for punishment. And then we just, of course, went in. That fight took 3.5 years, and no one takes time to read it now or to understand it. What was barred from the public schools was religious ceremony, and a prayer is a ceremony. No matter how you slice it, it is the core, the root, the thing that makes religion. Without prayer, there's no religion, because prayer is communication with your God. And there's no need of having a God if you cannot communicate with him. So the absolute essence of religion is the ability to reach your God with some sort of message, for instance, as to your purity, your devotion, whatever it is, your adherence to his ideas. And the Supreme Court recognized that this was a religious ceremony, no matter if it was openly said, quietly said, with student permission, without student permission, with school participation, without. It was still a religious ceremony. And this was what was ruled out of the public schools of America.
When you finally won your case, what was the response of different parts of the country as well as the media in covering your role in this? Was there compliance immediately with it, or was there resistance?
No,
in
there are
parts of
several
the country?
things, which is also I think that must be there are several things must be pointed out. The religious community are so hypocritical as a class. The whole community, all of them, all together, are hypocritical because they fought me tooth and nail. They were the ones who called me everything they could in articles where they were interviewed. I was the blackest of the black and the lowest of the low. On the day that the United States Supreme Court decision was rendered, immediately the head of the Presbyterian Church, the head of the Roman Catholic, they all rushed in and they said, well, we knew all along that this was an unconstitutional exercise, and we feel that this is an excellent decision. And the Presbyterians, the Jews, remember the Baptists, the Methodists, their official bodies, the National Council of Churches, all of them came out and said, oh, how wonderful. We must keep in compliance because this then absolutely guarantees, one, separation, and two, pluralism.
Which is what the country was founded on.
That's right, but at no time would they mention the dirty name of an atheist in all of that, and it always, all of their comments spoke to the United States Supreme Court. It never mentioned the fact that the case was brought by atheists or atheists were involved or what have you. You want to argue with him about his last statement, I know. He said what the country was founded on was pluralism.
The myth.
Well, the separation between church and state, freedom of religion and speech, and this. I mean, that's at least what we're told.
Yes.
Well, you and your family have undergone some terrible persecution at the hands of the state and also individuals and organized religion. I don't think people now realize the severity or remember the severity of what you've gone through.
I wrote one book on that, which only covered a particular period. For instance, the day that the decision was handed down was the day when we were under the most attack. And I mean defensive attack. I mean, we had to put up a defense. Even our dog's jaws were ripped apart by some policemen who attacked the house that night.
Police, no less.
Yes, they put a club in the dog's mouth and twisted it and tore his mouth up.
Ironically, it's because of the persecution after the decision that we were forced into a position of our family becoming essentially professional atheists, because nobody in our family could hold a job anywhere in the United States or do anything else but becoming official and absolutely full-time mentors for separation of state and church and going after it all the time. We couldn't do anything else. So actually, the Christian community owes the thorn in the spine that we are to the fact that they wouldn't let us do anything else. So we might have just been able to retire into the various occupations and fade into the background.
But the
I was
weren't allowed to do that.
extraordinarily naive because I thought, as soon as the United States Supreme Court speaks to this, everything is going to be cool and people are going to pat me on the back and say, well done. You sustained a principle upon which our nation was founded, and you lucky girl, will hire you back now at double the salary because I had a good position before that. And instead of that, there was such a burst of fury and hatred. My father was killed through that. He died during an attack upon our house. He had a heart attack.
Who was attacking? Who was actually attacking you?
Christians, actually mostly Roman Catholics, because they would identify this. They came to the house one night with a noose to hang me. And I went out to face them off on our porch, about 30 pieces, and they would say, yes, we're Roman Catholics.
This is
we're
the
Christians."
1960s, that in an enlightened liberal
decade,
democracy.
Well, you were actually driven out of the country, literally, though, weren't you?
We were driven out of the country on 2 different occasions, and we have been stripped of all of our possessions. We lost everything down to the clothing on our back.
How did they do
5 different occasions.
How in the world?
And the legal fights against us and the suppression and the abuse, the physical. For instance, my oldest son, William Murray, was beaten up during 1 year of this 126 times, 126 beatings during that period of time. We couldn't go to the store. Many stores wouldn't permit us to purchase food. Many stores wouldn't permit us to purchase clothing. Banks said, you know, we have the right to refuse customers and we simply don't want to do business with you. We had to go out of the state of Maryland to have a bank account. It was the most incredible thing. My son, I gave him some mail to take to the closest post office box in order to drop it in because we wanted to hit the 5 o'clock pickup since this was something for the United States Supreme Court. And he trots off out of the house. He's 16 years old to drop this into the mailbox and then turn around and come back. He hasn't gone. He hasn't come back in 4 hours. I'm frantic. I had the police searching for him. All the time that the police are searching for him, he is in the police station, beaten by the police, and had been picked up for loitering on the streets of Baltimore City. And when he came back, he was mutilated. His body was a mass of bruises. When I finally found that they did have him in a cell there in the police block. So we couldn't move. I can't tell you how many times we made frantic runs for our cars in parking lots or where we were abused and maligned. Talk about Austin, Texas a moment. How many times I have been insulted in restaurants. The doctor tells me to walk 2 miles a day. I can't. I cannot go out and walk 2 miles any place in Austin without being accosted by a religious nut.
So it continues today. This has been going on
You
for
know,
decades.
I thought one time I would get away from it, and I was down at Barton Springs, and only my head was just my chin in the water, and somebody swam over to me and said, "You're Madalyn Morrow here, and I want to talk to you about the second coming." I thought, oh no, it can't be. It's not as intense now as it was before, but Christians are nasty people.
Why are they so intensely hostile towards atheists? What are the psychological roots of this wildly irrational behavior on the part of these people who harassed you?
We have a couple theories.
Yeah, one of the theories that I have is that an atheist, I feel, is essentially doing something on a personal plane that a lot of religionists wish that they could do. That is, they are living their life in terms of their own intellectual capabilities, and they're solving their own problems and tackling things as they're going along, and they're not living with a crutch. And a religious person has that crutch to depend on for a certain part of their existence. And when they see somebody who is quite adequately functioning without that emotional kind of a crutch, they can't stand it. It's almost like the kid in grade school that everybody hated terribly when they made an A and broke the curve, and everybody else's grade point dropped down because they broke the teacher's curve. And I think it's that same kind of reaction to us a lot of time, because there are a lot of people that are Sunday go-to-meeting religionists that really philosophically are not aligned with what they're hearing. And they're
Or they
doing
don't fully and deeply believe in the doctrines. You raise doubts about that.
About it.
Threatens
All right, now
their
this
crutch.
is the thing that I want to speak
Yeah.
to, because when you believed in God, or if you did, or I don't know what your position is now, but you and everybody watching this program, everybody somewhere along the line doesn't believe in God. Something happens and they think, oh, if there was a God, he wouldn't have permitted this. And they have these terrible, terrible doubts.
Maybe
But-
there isn't one.
Yeah, but everybody around them believes in God. So they think, well, I can't be right and everybody wrong. So they bring themselves back into the system. Then here they see a personification, 180 pounds on the hoof, of their own doubt walking right there. And they can't let their doubt walk around. They have to go up and say, hey, you are my doubt. And I am going to kill my doubt because I must be in conformity with what everybody else thinks. Because if I do not, then I must accept their faith system, because their faith system obviously is correct. It's dominant. So when they see an atheist, they must do something with that atheist. And the more their own faith system is shattered by that original experience when they didn't believe, and the less capable they are of getting back into the media of religion, that much more are they adamant to kill the atheist, get him down somehow, because this is their own fear and they cannot face it.
How do people rationalize the contradiction that Christianity preaches love thy neighbor as thyself, and yet they're engaged in incredible hatred?
Yeah, but you see, that's not true. Christianity doesn't teach love.
That's
Christianity
one of the
teaches.
doctrines.
No, it isn't. One of their basic doctrine is intolerance and hatred. Their basic doctrine. Jesus Christ said over and over and over thematically in the New Testament, you must hate your brother, hate your sister. I came not to bring peace but the sword. I came to turn brother against brother, father against son. He says finally in his final outburst, yea, even unless ye hate yourself, you cannot come unto me. Ooh, that's sick. Ooh, that is sick. It is a doctrine of total and complete intolerance and total hatred. It's a doctrine of acceptance of death. Because all Christianity is, from the beginning to the end, is your preparation to meet death. And without that, the whole, what Abraham Lincoln called the Christian scheme of salvation, that death was introduced into the world by the original sin of Adam and Eve. And in order to overcome that death, you must accept Jesus Christ as your personal Savior. So you spend your whole life preparing to die. This is insane. It's anti-life. It's anti-love. It's just everything that is human and decent. And it's based on that. But then they attach the big lie to it. And they say, but this is love. For God so loved the world that he gave it cancer? Or for God so loved the world that he killed his own son? Ooh, I wouldn't kill my own son.
Well, these are paradoxes at the base of Christianity. Don't you think that it's sort of a illogical religion that is based on all these contradictions and paradoxes? Because obviously they do have doctrines manifesting love, but also ones manifesting hate, as you just pointed out.
But a tremendous amount of that love. I have just been over some Jewish scholars preparing for some programs that we are doing in respect to the Old Testament. And over and over again in this, the Old Testament, it is when they say love thy neighbor, they mean love that member of the clan.
I see.
They do not mean the Goyim. And over and over again they say it. They do not mean the other Semite groups who were worshiping the other Jewish Semitic gods at that particular time. They don't mean that. They mean only that particular cult which wants to continue to worship whichever name we want to put to the Old Testament God has four.
Right.
As a matter of fact, at the time of the handing down of the Ten Commandments, there were 3,000 persons in disagreement with Moses as to whether or not they should be accepted, and the Levites were called upon to immediately slaughter those 3,000. They said, we can do without you. You're the wrong kind of Semite.
Oh, there's a lot of that in the Bible.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of that in the Bible. And these Jewish scholars go into a great deal of biblical scholarship, internal evidence to show that the word neighbor only means a fellow follower of Yahweh or Jehovah or Elohim or whatever we're going to call him. It doesn't, that love does not extend to anybody outside of that tribe. And I think that most of the rabbis, if they were honest on public media, would say that. But of course, they're not going to be honest on public media. They're going to be honest with their fellow Jews in a synagogue.
Speaking of public media, what's been your experience with the media? You've been on all kinds of nationwide programs, talk shows, all the famous people. You've tried to get airtime yourself. What have been some of your experiences in the media?
I don't think that anybody really understands that we don't have a free media. Mike Wallace, for instance, had me talk for 6 hours with 4 men to see what I could say or what I couldn't say. Johnny Carson, I was closeted with his attorneys as to whether or not I could say the word atheist, it is incredible the amount of censorship that is on those talk shows. The other thing is that talk shows are formatted in such a way that you cannot say to the person who is questioning, oh, I don't want to answer that, I want to talk about the real issue. You would never get back on the show again. So what you have to do is confine yourself within the limitations of this. And I have been told over and over again, don't you open your mouth about this. Don't you dare say that. For some of the biggest named talk shows in the world, I think probably the most discouraging thing that has ever happened to me is to have Phil Donahue jump up and down like a little small boy in a tantrum and yell and say, it's my program, and you'll say what I want you to say.
And did
While
that
he's
get on the
jumping up
air,
and
his
down.
tantrum, or was
Oh,
it
no,
cut?
Of course
this-
not. They delete
No,
it.
this is in the
It's
back.
not
this-
live. There's an illusion that these shows are live.
This is in the green room in back when you are told what you can. Garth was there that day, and he just sat there and
I
watched Phil
couldn't
Donahue.
believe it. The other thing, too, that we see all the time is that there's this new syndrome of audience participation shows where the basis on which they're broadcast is that everybody in the audience is right, no matter what their opinion is, and that no matter who the guest is, the guest shall be brought down to the lowest common denominator intelligence-wise of whoever's in the audience. So even if they get a physicist on there, he's allowed to sit there while some housewife gets up and tells him how a nuclear power plant works and that he doesn't know anything about it. And that's one of the things that's very, very hard for us to get around and we get bogged down in, is that we'll get on a show with that constant referring, and that's I think a Phil Donahue type format because it was pioneered by him, is that we get on those shows and we have people in the audience who will want to get up and argue about, you know, how many hairs on God's head or how many camels can pass through the eye of the needle. And we'll spend half the show on that, or half the show arguing about kosher symbols on foods or something like that. And we never get anywhere to make our point.
It's an important
This
point.
is the thing that discourages me greatly, because what we have in the United States is civil equality, not intellectual equality. And when somebody says to me, prayers are answered and my opinion is just as good as your opinion, their opinion is not as good as my opinion, because I have done a hell of a lot more research than they have done. And the same thing with you. Somebody is not going to come up to you with a third grade opinion and say, I'll tell you what Nietzsche said. There's no way you're going to permit that, because you have some expertise in it and you have invested some time and energy. Yet we constantly get on programs also where someone is there who's going to talk in tongues. And this infuriates me, because I spent 20 years in universities, or we have somebody else who has spent 15, 10 years in a university attempting vigorously to pursue something like electrical engineering. And then you got somebody who is intellectually lazy, who never got past the 8th grade, who never read a book in their life, and they say, I know how to become famous. I'll babble. So they get on and they babble, and all the cameras come in and they say, you babble. And these people are instant heroes or instant celebrities or instant everything else. Out of what? Out of mediocrity, out of gimmick, out of... they probably don't even babble right. If one would go into the history of glossolalia and find out what true babbling is all about, if we only had some tapes from old babblings, we could compare them.
When you've been on these talk shows like Donahue and Johnny Carson, and you said things that are interesting and substantive vis-a-vis the religious and political issues that you're concerned with, have you found that sometimes they're censored out? The fact that they can edit afterwards these programs, have things that you liked and that you thought should be said been taken out? Do you have that experience?
We have that in an unending way. I'll tell you, the thing that is most frightening is when they take the first part of one sentence and then 10 minutes later they pick up the last part of another sentence and they put it together, and then they cut away right at the clip so that I am speaking, and then they cut over to the other person, and then when they come back, if my body posture has changed, no one notices it. And I have sat there and heard myself say the most remarkable things that I constantly say, let's sue. Well, I can't sue. I cannot sue because I'm a public figure. And anybody can say anything they care to say about me at any level, and I'm, quote, fair game. Garth has now gotten into this. He is speaking. He's been on just about every national show, too, and has traveled extensively and done shows on city levels in New York, Chicago, etc. And once again, the same thing happens. There is serious censorship, very serious censorship.
Well, didn't you used to have scripts that were censored before you were allowed to do the
Oh, yes.
program?
Yeah, that's a very good example. We started something that was the first in America, which was an American atheist radio series. And we started it off on what is now KLBJ, which was KDBC radio here in Austin. And at the time that it was KDBC, of course, it was owned by the Lyndon Baines Johnson family. And we started at the time that President Johnson was in the White House. and we were required to submit a script. I think it was 2 weeks
A written
prior,
script, yes.
a written script, 2 weeks prior to the radio program, and that was reviewed by the local attorneys, the station managers, sent to Washington to be reviewed by the president's personal counsel. And then once it was okayed, it was sent back to Austin, and
Well,
we
it
could
was
go on
also
the
sent to
air.
the FCC in between.
And did they red
Yes,
pencil a lot of material in it? Did
They did
actually
red
yes.
pencil.
rewrite your scripts?
Well, actually, after one gets censored a couple of times, one censors
Self-censors,
oneself
right.
because you know what you can slip by and what you can't slip by.
So if
Now,
you compare-
incidentally, Louis Shanks, the furniture dealer, immediately purchased the next half hour after my program, or the next 15 minutes after
15
my
minutes.
program, so that he could get a minister on to refute anything that I said. I have never yet heard that any of those ministers had to write their text out, send it to the local law firm, send it to Washington, send it to the FCC, to have it come back, have it approved, have it redlined, and then put on the air. They had no difficulty at all. We had enormous problems with those programs.
You know, talking about church and state, et cetera, the FCC requires religious programming on radio and television.
Public service.
Right.
Curious.
And yet, they don't require them to come under the fairness doctrine.
Let me tell you the funniest
Isn't that
thing of
amazing?
all, because I think that this is so incredible. Starting with KDKA Pittsburgh in 1930, when it was first licensed, the first radio station, the Federal Communications Commission laid down a regulation that 5% of all broadcast time must be given free to the churches. And this was a requirement for a long, long time. Later on, of course, I raised so much cane about this, and I filed, I think it was a total of about 5 different suits and 5 different kind of inquiries and appeals and asking for changing of regulation with the FCC. I made myself such a pain. They changed it, but what they would do is go to the television and radio stations and say, well, it isn't required, but it's expected that in all fairness, you'll give them 5%. So here they are completely dominating the airways. So we went in and we said, well, where's our 5%? And they said, well, now you're not a religion. However, just the moment that we get on to a local television or radio program, I will be called up from Chicago. I was just called from Los Angeles yesterday. They asked me to come out to Los Angeles, fly out to do the, what is it called?
Some kind
the
of
Hour
a new
magazine,
news magazine program.
which is syndicated on 95 stations, 18 million listeners. And I said, well, what are we going to have here? They said, well, if you come on, we have to give equal time to religion while you are on. I said, how many religious people have you had on this show? Oh, scores. Did you call me up for equal time when they were on? No. Well, but when I go on, you must have equal time. So I'm called into Chicago. I told Madalyn, you will have 1 hour. We'll fly you up. We'll pay your way. You walk into the studio and sit down. I come in. There's a rabbi, a minister, a guru, and a priest. And they're all sitting there with their black on. That's because their brains are dead and they're unemployed.
I mean, it's not because they're anarchists?
Please don't belabor the fair name of anarchy. So they're all sitting there, 5-1 against me. That immediately means if I have 60 minutes, but I don't because there's 10 minutes of advertising, so we're down to 20 minutes, and 5 people are going to talk in 20 minutes. That gives me 4 minutes out of an hour. And they always say to me, isn't this fair? We have really programmed this so everybody has a proper portion. And we are getting to the point now that we just refuse to go on. And I have some classic lines. We were just asked to come up to Dallas, and I said no. I said, if you had a brain surgeon on, you would not bring in a witch doctor to oppose him. But then again, I don't know but what they might with the Phil Donahue format. So it's very difficult.
In the few minutes, about 4 minutes we have
All right.
remaining, I'd like to ask you something. Considering the tremendous persecution that we've talked about and hatred that's been focused on you and then the struggles over the years, certainly this must have taken a toll personally or on your family life or something. What
I'm
has this done?
hopelessly insane. I think the whole family has a sense of humor that you wouldn't believe. And if we ever take them seriously, we are done for. If we ever start to get paranoid, we're done for because they're really out there. So we have to take it and laugh it off. We have the most bizarre jokes. For instance, in the Atheist Center, there's a great big jar full of green stuff, and we call it our Jim Jones Kool-Aid. And every time that the church comes out with some idiocy, why, we invent this in the office too, and we incorporate it in our routines. And I must say that the American Atheist Center is pretty much like MASH, except that the theme is different. We have the same kind of bizarre situations going all the time, and we ease the tension with the same kind of bizarre, risque, and black humor comedy that they do. And then, of course, almost all of the atheists who are really atheists and who are working very, very hard in this are anarchists. I'm an anarchist, an individualist anarchist, and Garth is an anarchist. So that it follows along with just everything that we are involved in our personal life. And no, it's not bad at all. It's not a bad life. It's their problem. Whoever does the hating has the problem, not me.
What keeps you going under all this persecution? Is it just simply the belief that you're right, or that you're fighting the good fight?
I've told Mother on a number of occasions what she should do is like the recent Superman movie that just came out. What she should do when they ask her, why are you in town on a particular program, and she should look square into the camera and say, I'm here to fight for truth, justice, and the American way, and just leave it go at that. Because when you're right, none of it bothers you. You just kind of sail right along, and we are very secure and content in our position. We feel that we've come down on the right side of the fence, so we roll
I think
along.
one of the things also that really annoys us is if somebody says to Garth, for instance, how does it feel to be Madalyn Murray O'Hare's son? Well, how does it feel to be anything else? How does it feel to be a Christian idiot? You know, how do they manage? How do they get along? Don't they have they must have terrible problems of dependency and inadequacy and guilt and anxiety. They must live a horrible, horrible life. Anybody who wants to die and go to heaven has to have a very, very bad life now.
So being free is its own reward.
That freedom is so exhilarating, it's incredible. We are in a kind of a state of euphoria all of the time, and we don't even need marijuana to get there.
Let me close with a couple of quotes from that wonderful atheist Ambrose Bierce.
Oh,
he
yeah.
has one in his Devil's Dictionary. Remember, on religion, the definition of religion is a daughter of hope and fear, explaining to ignorance the nature of the unknowable. And we were talking about the importance of prayer a while ago, and his definition of to pray is to ask that the laws of the universe be annulled in behalf of a single petitioner confessedly unworthy.
It's beautiful.
Well, thank you. And we'll do another program just shortly, and we'll show that to the folks in another week.
For their
good.
Christmas present.
I would say Godspeed, but I won't.
Careful, careful.
Good night.